if you work with middle school students or high school students, you hear things like I cannot believe how many times I can ask like in the middle of one sentence, it works like that. And when you talk that way, there's a tendency to try to write that way. Well, if you don't know both casual and formal register, it buys you trouble. We have begun now in the educational arena to do something we had thought not a good thing to do, and that's to emphasize formal register. At one point, teachers were told, oh, don't say anything. It'll lower the kids' self-esteem if we correct their grammar and insist upon them using good words. Well, that's crap. That was casual register. I'm going to tell you two stories, and you can see the difference. I'll tell you one in casual register. It's a story about a little boy on Ritalin, and you have to help me out. Are you ready? Do you know Miss Johnson came over to our house last night at 3 o'clock in the morning? Yes, she did, at 3 o'clock in the morning. And guess what she wanted? What? She wanted to borrow my mama's car. That's what my mama said. My mama said, you borrow sugar, but you do not borrow a car. And so she just stayed and stayed. Miss Johnson just stayed, and my mother had to get up early because my daddy works at the Metro. Your daddy work at the Metro? My daddy works at the Metro, and he got my mama that car at the credit union because, you can get good deals at the credit union if your daddy worked for the Metro. So he got my mama a 1995 Chrysler Suburban or something like that. But anyway, my mama really likes her car, so that's why she wouldn't let Miss Johnson borrow. But Miss Johnson didn't go home after my mama said she couldn't borrow a car. She just stayed and stayed. And since my daddy had to go to the Metro at 4:30, she said it was okay. But when she was still there when the Today Show came on, my mother was kind of tired, and she only gets to stay home on Wednesdays because Wednesdays is when she watches Young and the Restless. You watch Young and the Restless? My mama said, how many times can Victor marry Nikki? Anyway, she was really getting tired, and so after Miss Johnson had been over to our house for a long time, the school called, and my mother answered the phone, and they asked to speak to Miss Johnson, and my mother said, Miss Johnson does not live here. Miss Johnson said she had her phone calls forwarded over to our house, and my mother said, that's taking a lot of liberty to have your phone forwarded to somebody's house when you don't really ask them to do that. But anyway, my mother's a good person, and since it was the school, she took the call, and so they wanted her to come and pick up Jack. You know Jack? Jack ever been to your house? Jack touches everything in your living room, and he touched my mama's dog. The dog's head go up and down like this. She got it from the hemisphere in 1965. It was very dear to her. And he broke the dog's head off, and now the dog's head is on with super glue. We put it on with you're not supposed to be able to see through the super glue, but you can see the super glue. And my mother said she was going to write the super glue people a letter because they said you wouldn't be able to tell that it was broken, but you can see that it was broken because now his head moves like this. It won't move up and down like it used to. And so my mother was very mad about that because Jack broke up everything in the living room, but she was really mad because he broke a dog from the hemisphere that she got in 1966. And so then the school wanted her to come and pick up Jack, and so then she said she didn't have a car, and my mama said, do I look like Yellow Cab? But because she was very, nervous about Jack being in school, she took her to school, and guess what happened when we got to school? It was an ambulance parked in front. My mama said, that boy killed somebody. But the ambulance driver was really good looking. My mama said he was really fine. I asked her how she knew. She said she was blind. She wasn't blind and she wasn't dead, so she could look very good and see he was good looking. And so she said that he was very good looking and he had big muscles and everything. He kind of looked like Sly Stallone, and my mother loved Sly Stallone. Did you see him in Rambo? He was very good in Rambo. He held a gun and it went like this, and all the bullets fell out. My mother thought that was really sexy. She told my daddy that, but he was not impressed. And so then we got to the school, and she was looking at the ambulance driver, but my mother went on in the school, but Miss Johnson stayed out there to talk to the ambulance driver, and my mother wanted to know why she didn't go in, because after all, it wasn't her kids who had been called. It was about Miss Johnson's kids. So when she went in the office, she said, I am not Jack's mother. I brought her over here, but she is outside talking to the ambulance driver, and we don't know why the ambulance is his, but I can guess. I'm Marcus and Kevin's mother. You know Marcus and Kevin? I'm a very good mother, and I don't ever have any trouble with my children. And so when I come up here, I'm coming up here just to volunteer. But I brought Miss Johnson up here because, I'm a good neighbor. And so anyway, the principal came out and said that Jack had been very disruptive at school and that he had torn up everything. And you should have seen the principal's office. Everything in there was caca. And they called the ambulance because Miss Johnson didn't get there in time. You know why she didn't get there in time? She had to go home and change her clothes. She put on a skirt that was so tight, she had to walk down the steps like this. And that's why she couldn't walk very good, and that's why she couldn't get into school real fast. Plus, she was talking to the ambulance driver. So then they took Jack to the hospital. And Miss Johnson was supposed to ride in the back. But guess where she rode? Up front with the ambulance driver. And he almost had to push her up in the ambulance because she had on a taut skirt and she couldn't climb up those stairs. So she pushed in the ambulance. And in the meantime, Jack was in the back, and my mother said she could see through the little window. He had the tongue depressors and all the tubes. He had torn up the back of that ambulance by the time they got to the hospital. And they took him up on the 5th floor. You know what's up there, right? They gave him a lot of tests. It took all day. My mama missed Young and the Restless. And she doesn't like missing Young and the Restless because if you miss it on Wednesday, you don't know what happened. You can miss all other days, but if you miss Wednesday, you don't know what happened. So she was very mad about that. But anyway, he had to stay up there a long time. They gave him some psychological, that's what, some psychological tests. And they gave him some little yellow pills, some, you heard of them? My mother said, oh, some little bitty pills. She said, Jack need bigger pills than that because he'd been cutting up real bad. And so she said to Miss Johnson, you need to go check and see if he can get some bigger pills because those look like they're not going to do a lot for him. But anyway, he's supposed to take those pills 2 times a day. One time he's supposed to take them in the morning from his mother, and the other time he's supposed to get them from the school nurse. But I know Miss Johnson's not going to get up in time to go give him those pills, and he's going to miss that morning pill. And you know, by 12 o'clock, he's going to be really bouncing off the wall. So my mother said she would call Miss Johnson and wake her up because she's a very nice woman, and she wakes people up like that because she gets up real early because my father worked at the Metro, and he has to be at work at 4:30. So my mother said she would be up and she would call Miss Johnson. But anyway, he is back at school and everything, and he's supposed to be doing okay. But my mother says one thing for sure, he can't come back in the living room because, you know, he broke the little dog's head, didn't move like this. And so now he can't come back anymore, and that's what happened to Jack. Now, what was the beginning of that story? You don't know. What was the plot? What was the ending? See, in formal register, there must be a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you're going to write in formal register, it has to flow. It has to go that way. Here's the same story in formal structure. Mrs. Johnson visited her neighbor early this morning in order to borrow her vehicle. Unfortunately, the neighbor was not willing to part with the vehicle, but she stayed to visit anyway. She stayed long enough until the school called and said that there was a difficult time going on at school with her son, and she was asked to come and retrieve him for home care. Mrs. Johnson did not arrive at the school in a timely manner, and unfortunately, the school personnel were required to call an ambulance. She did make it before the ambulance departed, and she accompanied him to the hospital. After thorough psychological evaluation, it was determined that her son be placed on Ritalin, 5 milligrams to be administered in the morning at home, another 5 milligrams to be administered at noon by the school nurse. After 6 weeks, Jack's prognosis is excellent. He has not had any outbursts that could not be contained at the school level. Same story. Which one did you like best? The first one. You know why? Casual register is entertaining. It's akin to gossip. You know, and when I went, guess what happened? You went, what? And then that leads to another thing, and then what? And yeah, and oh, wow. But it's very difficult to write it. It's fun to speak in it, tough to write in it. And we all use both of them. The only problem occurs is when you can only use one. Can you see the need for it? Absolutely. Can you see why we must incorporate formal register in school if we want to get better academic performance from our kids? Absolutely.